Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Shofi Fatimah and my partner Sasmita, and we will explain about the action research. In here, there is 3 chapters. The first one is planning the action. The second one is putting the plan into the action, and the last, the action research process. Here is the first explanation about the planning the action. This is the first step to start the action research project. Therefore, the search point for action research is identify the problem you want to focus. Identify and explore the problem means that you have recognized the areas you want to examine and you want to find the possible answer. In planning the action, there is 4 stages. The first stage is finding a focus area for your research, and the second stage is developing and refining your research, and the third is getting permission and covering ethical issues, and the last is preparing your resources and material. The first is finding a focus area for your research. Finding a such point is not easy, but many teachers difficult to start. Sometimes finding a focus is difficult because the characteristic and process of action. The nature of action research is such that some teachers find the focus become clearer. You must begin by identifying your general area is usually the starting point. Here there is several questions can help with your thinking in this early stage. The first one is what do you feel curious about, and there is what new approach that learning or teaching are you interested in trying, and there is what needs of your student are not playing with. Here is the second explanation about developing and refining the question. At this early stage, you might find that you have a fine number of research questions. There's nothing wrong with having a few questions, but your research will be easier to manage. If you can stay focused, please not ask strange to find the problem or issues you first rise into both. Having to narrow down the initial focus is a common experience in most studies. This involves developing more specific questions that will help logically direct you to the most appropriate way to collect your data and analyze your findings. Here is the tab from a question checklist. The third explanation about getting permission and conferring ethical issues. The requirements for ethical standard involving human participants vary different research studies, depending on the scope of the project and the methods to be used. The number of researchers and the participant involved, and the location of the research and how the research will be distributed. Here there is 3 examples of the permission. The first one is whose permission do you need for your research? Here, 2 kinds of permission must be considered. First, depending on the requirements in your organization, you may need to obtain permission from the school board, district, or the individual school to undertake the research. The other type of permission are informing people that you are conducting research. So, the second is gaining their consent to participate. Participants have a right to know about the purpose, the procedure, and possible effect of the research on and how the research will be used. So the second is who will be affected by your research. Here, research should not involve any risk, harm, or disadvantage to the student by being involved in the action you take. There are explaining carefully why you are asking people to participate, what methods you are using, and how the research will be used for positive purpose. For the example, being video recording means that student can immediately be identified on screen. So the search is who should be told about your research when it is complete. Here, there is a need to explain who will be informed about the research and how it will be published. Participants have a right to know whether they will be given information about the outcome and what form. Some teachers I know have sometimes involved their participant is presenting the research at the teacher workshop or conference so that they can give their perspective. The last explanation about preparing your resources and material. As you begin your research, you need to consider what resources, material, and support your source access. Here there is 3 explanations about preparing your research and material. The first one is consulting the literature. Consulting the literature very helpfully and strongly recommended. Reading the literature can help give ideas for focus area on question. It helps to get ideas about how to design your research and collecting data. Example, journal, book, database, internet. So the second is involving others. Another aspect of the resources you need for your research is identify the people you will involve. Identify the people you will involve are students in the classroom, teacher, parents. Then you will need to ask permission if they are to be directly involved in your data collection. So the last is identifying and using requirement. Here, you need to plan for the requirement or materials for your research and have them ready for use. You can use hardware, software, and things or recording. The software materials you use depend on the type of data you decide to collect and your own preference from documenting information. When you are actually in the classroom, it makes it easier.
Now, we will discuss about putting the plan into action. The first is about identifying main ways to collect the data, or combining classroom activities and data collection. And second is selecting appropriate method, or considering a range of observation method and non-observation method. And third is incorporating technology into data collection. And fourth is cross-checking and strengthening information. Let's take a look to the table on how to collect the data in every activity in the classroom. So here we go. This is the example of classroom activity and how to collect the data in each activity. From the table, the researcher used audio to record classroom interaction, and second, collect the student tasks, and third, discuss with student, and fourth, the researcher gives student a survey, and next, the researcher asks every student to write a letter and explain their effective way to learning the English. And the last, the researcher conduct an interview to every student in the classroom. In this part, you have to know and considering to use the right method that's suitable with your research, whether you use non-observation method or observation method. In observation method, you may use observation and other tools that supporting your research, and in non-observation method, you may use interviews, questionnaire, and classroom discussion, and other tools that can support your observation. There are many methods that can be used in action research. Therefore, now I will explain these methods. Observing and describing. First, you have to focus. Focus to seek specific information about something that related to your research. And second, objective. Observe and see the situation and the student as they really are. And third is reflective. Observe and see the things from research position. So see as you are a research, you are conduct and observe in the classroom. And fourth is documented. You may make notes and recording by video or photos. There are variety of roles in observation. The first is other observation, in which observation by you of others, and second is peer observation, in which observation of others, other teachers by you, and third is self-observation, in which observation of your own behavior, thought, action, and ways of communicating as a teacher, and many more. And fourth is collaborative observation, in which observation with other observers. Observers in this context, it can be others teacher, student, team teacher, and many more. In this part, you have to make a plans for your observation. There are several things that you have to consider. First is about who and how many, so you have to focus on your participant and your student that can provide any kind of information that can overcome and answer your question and your problem. And second is what and where, so you have to considering the specific behavior and specific location of your research in order to make you a focus in your doing research. And the third is about when and how often, so you have to decide on which part of the lesson or in the classroom activity that you need to observe. You might observe in the beginning of the lesson, or in the middle of the lesson, or in the end of the lesson, or you might observe a whole of the classroom activity. So be wise on choosing and observe the classroom activities. And in the fourth, there is a where and how, so you have to think and consider about the place or position that you think the best place to you to observe and see the student. You might see and observe the student from behind of your classroom, or in front of the class, or in every corner in the classroom. In this part, discuss about doing observation. But before we go further, I will explain about the tools that used to obtain the data. The first is observation sheet. This paper not as structured as observation checklist, and this paper used to note description and account of several action and activity that happen in the classroom. And second, there is behavior checklist. In this type of observation, allow you to see which particular type of behavior in the student that keeps repeating the most. For example, in the table, so there are interrupt neighbor works, attempt to get other student attention, teach neighbor physically, and so on. So these three behavior of student that repeating the most in the classroom. And next is observation note. In observation note, there are two types. The first is reflecting observation. This reflective observation is not written about classroom event with the research comments placed next to them. And the second type is analytical observation, which takes the process of recording reflective observation one step further by getting you think about the main elements of feature of their meaning. As we can look in the table of analytical observation, there is detailed information about student response. So it means that in analytical observation is more detailed that showing transcription rather than in reflective observation. And next there is narrative observation. In this narrative observation usually require a great deal of free handwriting. Even if you are using a computer, you still can use a free handwriting in your computer. Take a record and take a picture in order to capture the situation in the classroom. There are types of interview. The first is structured interview, where the researcher already well planned a question that want to ask to the participant or student. And second, semi-structured interview, when the researcher already planned the question, but in the process of interview, suddenly the researcher have idea to ask the question that out from planning the question. And third is unstructured interview, where the researcher uh, doesn't have planned a question, but it doesn't mean that the researcher aimless to conduct a interview. Questionnaire. There are open-ended question and closed-ended question. In closed-ended question, uh, the opportunity to answer the question is limited. For instance, yes or no question, multiple choices, and so on. But in contrast with open-ended question, in open-ended question, the opportunity to answer the question is not limited because it allows the participant to answer as many as they can according to the need of researcher. For instance, guide item and questionnaire layout. Furthermore, there are tools such as journal and classroom document. In classroom document, it can be a books, syllabus, lesson plan, and so on.
Here is the last explanation about the action research process. The action research process involves reflecting, planning, acting, and observing. Even though in several literature describe different about the process of action research, however, they still have common element of the action research. And I will show you about the process of action research based on stranger. Here is the process more fully from the stranger. The first one is reflect. Experience and perception are used to identify an area of focus based on the problem. This time, take to review what is already known about the problem or focus area and to learn more about the problem. The second one is plan. Plan is developed for taking action and or for gathering information and data in order to observe or capture the experience or monitor the practice. In space, the research question and methods are explained. Number 3 is X. The researcher implement the plan or change a practice and collecting data. Data may be collected from a variety of sources. Number 4 is observe. The researcher synthesizes and analyzes the data. The key issue is related to the problem are identified. So number 5 is reflects. The researcher reflects on and interprets the information and communication or reports it to others. Action are taken and a new area of focus is identified. Number 6 is plan. A new plan of action is developed to resolve or investigate the problem. A new action is taken and data are collected. Perhaps the same type of data or perhaps something different. So the last is observe. The new data are analyzed, synthesized, and interpreted. The researcher then spirals back into reflection process.
There is an example of action research that conducted by Professor Wang. First is reflect. Professor Wang is not satisfied about the level of reflection evident in her online class discussion. Therefore, she briefly reviewed the literature to see what others have learned about improving student communication online. Then she planned, and in the plan session, she using a categorization framework, and then she found in a journal article. Then she developed a plan to look at the class data. And third is act. She saved the student online response over a week's period and also interviewed two of the students. Then the Professor Wang do observation in their classroom, and the result of the observation show that the low level of reflection are the norm. And then she going back to the reflect step where she decided that student must not understand what is expected. Then she discussed her finding with her department colleagues. Based on the data and what she read in the literature, the professor believed that the student need a rubric to explain the level of communication and that some modeling might be useful. In addition, in the next step, which is planned, Professor Wang, together with her colleagues, developed a rubric for use in online discussion and include sample of the appropriate responses for the different level. And then in the next step there is act. Professor Wang used this rubric in her next class and again collect the data. And after that, the Professor Wang observed again, then analyzed student online responses that will spur her back into the process as he observed the student pattern of behavior to determine whether the level of communication has improved or not. So she will again reflect on what she learned in order to make new plans and techniques.